Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Vedanta Center of Greater Washington, D.C. and its affiliates. um, I'm looking forward to this morning's lecture, actually. It's got a lot of pieces in it from a lot of different directions and a lot of places. And one of the really cool things about it to me is that it's literally gathered from across millennia of times and from cultures all around the world and from different types of thinkers and different religions. And it's always so, I don't know, encouraging to me, exciting to me to find these truths verifying each other from such a disparate and varied number of people under different circumstances, different cultures, different societies at different times. The lecture is titled Into the Soul. I could have taken that from any of the great teachers, but it was Saint Teresa of Avila in particular that inspired me. And she says, that the greatest contentment is found when she's talking to her convent by going deeply into the soul, into one's own self. I gave that little vlog this week on Marcus Aurelius, and he also makes that same quote that happy is the man who finds his contentment within his own soul, who looks into his own soul for that contentment. And some of my references now are from a man named Dionysius from 400 AD, who says very similar things. And I wanted to start the talk this morning with a prayer that he makes. He was a Christian Neoplatonist. I'll leave that to you to look up. Wikipedia's got a great article on it. And he was writing in the late 5th century. And his prayer that he places at the beginning of his writing is something that could have been in one of the Upanishads. It could have started one of the early prayers. It's very, very similar in its spirit, with a different spice in it, really. He says, guide us to that topmost height of mystic lore, which exceeds light and more than exceeds knowledge, where the simple, absolute, and unchangeable mysteries of heavenly truth lie hidden in the dazzling obscurity of the secret silence, outshining all brilliance with the intensity of their darkness, and surcharging our blinded intellects with the utterly impalpable and invisible fairness of glories which exceed all beauty. Such be my prayer. And to you, my dear Timothy, who he's writing his lecture to, I counsel that, in the earnest exercise of mystic contemplation, you leave the senses and the activities of the intellect, and all things that the senses or the intellect can perceive, and all things in this world of nothingness, or in that world of being, and that, your understanding being laid to rest, you strain as far as you can toward a union with him whom neither being nor understanding can obtain. For by the unceasing and absolute renunciation of yourself and all things, you shall in pureness cast all things aside, and be released from all, and so shall be led upward to that ray of that divine darkness which exceeds all existence. There are so many wonderful little references in there that talk about these hidden places in the soul that he's alluding to. That's that room of secret silence that almost turns into a theme in early Christian writing. To touch that space inside that isn't about words, it isn't about communication, it isn't about cognizing or analyzing. It's not a thought castle. It's something that precedes all of that in a great stillness, a great emptiness, a great darkness, which at the same time is of the very essence of knowledge, the very essence of beauty and love, that's not communicable in mere words or through any manifestation, but somehow has its existence for the soul who finds its way into that inner space, into that inner chamber of the heart, or in the words of Saint Teresa, into that inner castle where her beloved lives, shining in all of its brightness. In Inspired Talks, our own Swami Vivekananda, he says, we enter into creation. And then for us, it becomes living. That's an important point in the fact that when the scriptures are telling us to look into the soul, they're telling us really indirectly to pull ourselves out of the world of the senses, the world of the body, which is actually the battery, as I like to say, or the empowering of the world that gives it its existence, that gives your mind its meaning, that gives your body its action in the world. And from that, mistakenly, we take our identification. And he's telling us that we enter into this creation just by assuming that it's real, by assuming that it's meaningful, by assuming that it's filled with our qualities of love and intelligence and a real existence. Things are dead in themselves. So he's saying it's not true that they are alive and that they have meaning in and of themselves. He says they're dead in and of themselves. Only we give them life. And then, like fools, we turn around and are afraid of them, or we enjoy them. But be not like certain fisherwomen who, caught in a storm on their way home from the market, took refuge in the house of a florist. There they lodged for the night in a room next to the garden where the air was full of the fragrance of flowers. In vain they tried to rest, until one of their number suggested that they wet their fishy baskets and place them near their heads. Then they all fell into a sound sleep. We know that story. It's holding on to the familiar when you're laying in the room of bliss and for lack of other references, all these gems and treasures, and you're clutching to your worn old purse just because it's something you know, something you're comfortable with. He's saying this world is our fish basket. What is this world? Again, our body, our mind, and its relationship to these objects that seem to be real, that we've created our comfort in that place. Jesus says that wherever your treasure is, there your heart is also. And mistakenly, so many of us have placed our heart into this world, into the things that are temporary, which is fine and beautiful in as long as they last. But because we haven't looked beyond and into their nature, we're going to lose them all. One by one, they'll be taken away, either during life or at the end of life. But the one thing is sure, that they all go, that they all disappear. And so Swami Vivekananda is saying here, he says, don't do this. He says, we must not depend upon this old fishy basket for our enjoyment. Those who do are the tamases, or the bound. Those are the people who get caught in a sense of inertia. Those people who get caught in that sense of depression, that sense of glumness, because you begin to see the meaningless of the world. You begin to see this impermanence of the material things, and it breaks the heart. It breaks the spirit who has depended on them, who's counted on them for its enjoyment and for its fulfillment. He says, be not like these certain fisherwomen. He says, it will make you of the tamasic, or the bound, and there are the rajasas, or the egotistical. So for those who don't find that don't come to that realization of the emptiness of it, who don't fall into that state of inertia, they fall into the state of the rajas, that hyperactivity, that egotism. And they become full of I, me. And we see that everywhere, this drunkenness of perspective in the world today, as we're all trying to put ourselves first, put our countries first, put our ideas first, and more than ever, seemingly in such a vulgar and careless way, a way that really reduces the respect for people around us and for people who are in the same condition of us, denying that empathy and denying that compassion. He says they do good work sometimes. He was a fair man. He understood. Yes, there's good and bad in everything. There are no evil, directly or purely evil anything. It doesn't exist. He says they do good work sometimes and may become spiritual. But the highest are the sattvikas, those who are introspective, those who live only in the self. And so he's pointing us in that direction. He's also encouraging us to take our eyes off of the things that are fluttering and glittering, off of the sounds that are alluring and making that siren call to our attention outside. To lay all of those things aside and to investigate this place that the mystics call the secret silence, this place of stillness that lays at the heart of it all. in the same way that a seed lies completely still and yet is full and pregnant, bursting with the potential of its existence, to find that quiet space inside. When Sri Ramakrishna, one of my favorite stories in the gospel, when Bhagavati, that woman, as the, as the scripture likes to call such women, that fallen woman, comes to see him, and of course she's very shy at the beginning, as we all know the story, and she hangs out in the back of the room, well aware of her condition. But Ramakrishna is nice to her and starts a conversation with her. Asks her, has she gone to visit holy places? Has she given things to good people? Has she done acts of service? And of course, she's embarrassed by it because she really hasn't done any of that to speak of. And he says, there must be something good. And she says, well, yes, I did build a bathing ghat. And he praises her. Oh, very good, very nice. And then she gets bold and she tries to step out on that accomplishment, tries to identify with it, reaches for a star just a little bit beyond her purveyance, I guess you could say. And she touches his feet, and of course we all know that the poor woman is humbled all the way down because he jumps up like a scorpion has stung him and runs over to the holy water and starts dumping it on his feet to recover. But the beautiful end of the story, because that's not where it ends, is when he goes and sits with her on the floor and sings a song to her. I don't know of many people that Thakur sang a song for directly. And so she gets a special blessing. And this song tells us the same thing. The song says, dwell, O mind, within yourself. Enter no other's home. If you but seek there, you will find all that you are searching for. God, that true philosopher's stone, who answers every prayer, lies hidden deep within your heart, the richest gem of all. How many pearls and precious stones are scattered all about the outer court that lies before the chamber of your heart. That idea that within yourself is your contentment, within yourself is your joy. This is important to know in the times when it doesn't seem at all real, in the deepest depressions. These times now where you're stuck in your home and separate from your friends, and some of us with loved ones in the hospital, passing away without any means of being there to comfort or care for them. I mean, the very worst of situations. It's important now more than ever that we know and that we count on the fact that all of our contentment, all of our hope, all of our joy, the very source of our love, is lying within us, quiet and still and waiting. And to take that faith and to go there, to drink from that well, which Jesus says, if you drink from that well, you'll never thirst again. And Ramakrishna says, if you slake from that wine, you'll never need another sip for drunkenness again. To take these words to heart, to really believe them. Ramakrishna says that faith is the foundation of it all, because you have to trust the words of the saints who have been to this place, and to let you to help you believe, to help you hold on, to know that the journey is worthwhile, to know that the effort is important and worthwhile, and not just worthwhile. It's a journey that is inevitable, that every soul will make and has to make, and that we're going to talk later on about the fulfillment of that journey, about finding that philosopher's stone. It's important to know that that love that lies within you, that self that gives you your intelligence, that gives everything you see and experience meaning, that is the philosopher's stone, that is the beloved, turning everything to gold. And so it's that thought of the beloved, it's that constant recollection of the beloved, it's using that ideal of pure and unconditioned love to measure the whole world, to give all of the things in the world their proper meaning and their proper place, so that they don't become elements of delusion, but become reflectors of a divine joy, reflectors of a divine knowledge, reflectors of a divine hope, and not to lose our way, not to get caught in the fish baskets, as it were, to have our choice of either egotism or depression or being overcome and lost. Those are the only alternatives, aside from just staying completely intoxicated from the sense of escapism, not letting ourselves learn, not letting ourselves see, not enduring the pain of our decisions, but that escapist period that leads to that tamas that Ramakrishna is warning us about. St. John of the Cross, one of the contemporaries of St. Teresa of Avila, he writes that one can at times in a natural way meditate discursively as before and discover something new in this. He's talking about prayer, about having an inner dialogue, an inner conversation. All of us have that inner voice, it seems, I hope, otherwise I'm insane, have that inner discourse going on all the time, but we assume it's ourselves that we're talking to. And we're not the great listeners of it always. We're more interested in the talking side of it. And in this inner contemplation that some of the early Christians are talking about, it's understanding that that inner voice is a conversation between you and the beloved, you and your highest ideal, you and pure love and pure intelligence, and that you have that company built into you. You have that presence built into you. And he's encouraging you here to engage in that discourse, engage in that contemplation, come to the awareness of the presence of that beloved within you. And that is the beginning of this joy. That's the beginning of the path that will take you to that inner chamber, that inner castle that Saint Teresa alludes to and describes for us in her book. He says that meditate discursively as before and discover something new in this. That's the thing. It's like this is not old, it's not dry, it's not empty. Discover something new, investigate something new, try something new. When things seem to get stale, when things seem to get rote and rudimentary, it's like awaken that sense of wonder, awaken that sense of excitement, because you haven't seen it yet. You don't know what's there. There's something amazing there, and you haven't found it yet. You don't give it up because it's something amazing. It's something that's worth everything in life for. And so John is saying that. He said this need will continue until we acquire the habit of contemplation to a certain perfect degree. We're going to wander around in that conversation for a while. We know we've got some time. The indication of this will be, he's going to give us what is the indication of actually finding that pearl or stumbling across that. We're getting close, we're getting warm. I don't know if as kids you ever played that game, hot or cold, where somebody hides something and you are looking for it, and the person's saying, warmer, you're getting warmer, oh, colder, colder. And you're searching until you find it. If you're having that conversation properly inside, that's very much the nature of it sometimes. You can feel the beloved saying, yes, yes, you're getting warmer. And then that misery, that dismal undertaking when you're not, when you're going farther away, when you're getting lost in the senses, lost in your ego, in your identity as a body and a mind. He says the notification of this will be that every time they intend to meditate, they immediately notice this knowledge and peace. You notice, Thakur says you touch that thing and you say, what is this? What is this? There is in each one of us this beautiful strand. I like to borrow Thakur's example when he would travel from one place to another in a spiritual way. He said he would follow a line of light. And I love that image. And so I've kind of begun to try and think about this line of inner joy that lies within us, this line of inner hope that you can follow to the beloved, that once you touch it, like, what is that? What is that light? A joy that's independent of mood, of an optimism that's independent of condition or circumstance. It's an amazing area of the mind that lies there so quiet and so still, like we've mentioned so many times before, that it is that secret silence in the sense that it is unchanging, that it's utterly rooted and utterly dependable. And yet it does not flutter, it does not glitter, it doesn't catch the attention of the senses or body in any way. And it can only be discovered by turning away from those things, by quieting down that noise. Once all of that noise is gone, once all of that disturbance is gone, then you begin to hear something profoundly beautiful. You think, what is that? What is that? And unfortunately, then you objectify it and you go looking for it, and it can't be found. It can't be found in that way. That's why it's this undoing inside. So we immediately notice this knowledge and peace, but then we also notice our own lack of power or desire to meditate. That we begin to understand, well, we don't have what's necessary. This is not a task that the ego can get involved in, that the ego can actually do. It's not something that you're able to accomplish. And as you approach that light inside, at least within the Christian traditions, they talk about this dark night of the soul, this place where you go through a period of real disruption when you begin to see the failure of ego, when you begin to see that everything that you've based your life on, all of family and friends and money and job and prestige and reputation, that all of these social functions, all of this noise, as you mature, if you're paying attention, they begin to fall away. And if you've relied on them for your joy, and you've relied on them for your self-esteem, and you've relied on them for your meaning of life, little by little that bitterness begins to encroach, that disappointment, that disillusionment begins to come in. And it is the dark night of the soul. Brother Lawrence says it's paradise to suffer and to be with him. So the important thing is, when this suffering begins to happen, when this dark night of the soul begins to alight, to know the company of the divine is still there as it ever was, and to put your eyes on it and to hold your eyes on it, because the ride is bumpy at this point in life. He says it is a paradise to suffer and to be with him, so that if in this life we would enjoy the peace of paradise, he says, if in this life you want to see and know this paradise, this Eden that lies within you, there's four things that he lists for those who like lists. Number one, we must accustom ourselves to a familiar, humble, affectionate conversation with him. This has been one of the biggest insights for me. I know not often as a Swami do we get up like in an AA meeting and put our stuff out there, but I want to be a cheerleader. Really, that's, I feel like, much more than any kind of a teacher is a cheerleading. This little nugget here, I stumbled on or began to understand only about probably 2 months ago. And many of you know that I've suffered a lot or dealt a lot with depression over years, decades even. And for the first time in my life now, I'm standing up in my AA meeting here and saying, for the last 6 weeks, I have not had a depressive period. And it's because of this little nugget that is being given here. We must accustom ourselves to a familiar, humble, affectionate conversation with him. Something that I learned, and it just takes faith. That's all it does. It's you assuming something that you may not know. And that assumption is that there's a causeless sense of joy at the very center of yourself that is always accessible to you, independent of your mood, independent of your condition, independent of your feeling hopeless or hopeful in the world, that is completely independent. It sits there within you. And when you sit to meditate, when you sit down to be with the beloved, that is the first thing to establish. It's like building a nest for the divine, as it were, establishing your temple, your shrine. The first thing to do is to establish that positive, affectionate, loving place that needs no cause. You don't need a reason to be happy. You don't need a reason to feel the love. That you just simply assume that existence. You simply assume. And through that, you find it. Through that, it becomes experienceable on the outer sense of things, where we tend to pick or check with our senses and mind about how we're doing. Gets picked up out there, but it's important to know that it doesn't exist out there. It is before that. And if you go looking for it as a sensation, you can't find it. It can't be found. It has to be an assumption of faith, a knowing of its existence. And that quiets yourself, quiets the mind enough, takes away that desperation, that focus on what's not, and it gives you an experience of what is. So we must accustom ourselves to a familiar and humble, affectionate conversation with the divine. So to put that positive spirit, to acknowledge that positive presence within us. Number two, we must hinder our spirits wandering from him upon any occasion. Just keep coming back to that bliss, keep coming back to that joy, to that assumption of love that is within. Don't let the mind wander from it. Don't start analyzing it. Don't start cognizing it. Don't start doing anything. Don't be the doer. That's if you find yourself doing, you're losing it. Undo, undo, undo. Simply sit in the assumption of that joy. Three, we must make our heart a spiritual temple wherein to adore him incessantly. And this is where you can think. This is where you can cognize. And that is when you begin to give shape, give form to the presence of the beloved, which is there already. But through that adoration, through that worship, through whatever remembrance of either your mantra or the name of God, or the stories of the divine, or these beautiful things, to always have the stories but abstract from them, take from them, separate from them the physical, the reminder of this assumed love, this assumed affection, this assumed optimism that lives within, and don't let it wander, and keep your heart in a spiritual temple. Really honor this space within. Don't let any negativity in there. Don't let any undoing, in the sense of sarcasm or hopelessness or a negative view toward your practice or yourself. Don't let any of those things invade this space. This space is pure. This space is loving. This space is intelligent. This space is what you are looking for. And number four, we must watch continually over ourselves that we may not do, say, or think anything that is against our highest nature or against the will of the divine, the things that we know are right and good. If you're ever wondering about those, my upbringing was Christian, and one of my favorite verses in the whole world, as you know, is 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 through 8. And those verses give you the definition of love in a most wonderful description. And those are the ones that I use to test my attitude while I'm in that inner chamber, while I'm in that inner shrine of the beloved, that it always hopes, it always believes, it always trusts, it never fails, it keeps no record of wrongs. These are the qualities of the beloved, the qualities of that affectionate hum that is at the very base of your being, the very center of your soul. Now, it's important that we find, or not find, this place. It's important that we acknowledge this place, because there's a part of the journey where it gets quite dark, and I think a lot of people experience this darkness without knowing its nature, without knowing why it's there, because it's there for a most beautiful reason. And if you are able to apply this reason to depression, or to hard times, or to sadness, or to hurt, or to loneliness, it's really a very important tool for finding your way out, for finding the surface of the water so that you can get a breath of fresh air. But he says all these painful experiences, as well as the beneficial fruits of transformation, are attributable to contemplation. Now, this was interesting to me, because normally we think that contemplation, oh, it's just going to make us happy. It's it's the soma drug, that's going to keep us all in a blissful state, and sometimes that's what makes religion seem unreal, or makes a religion seem like an imaginary friend. But that's not necessarily always the circumstance that we find ourselves in. He says that although this contemplation is an inpouring of God into the soul, a divine, loving knowledge that is general, without images or concepts, obscure and hidden from the one who receives it, a knowledge that both purifies and illumines, contemplation embraces the totality of the relationship, an attitude of personal and complete receptivity before God, who is communicating himself in his personal infiniture. I ran ahead of myself. So he's not talking about the dark night of the soul here yet. Um, I did. I got a section ahead here. But this idea that in this space of the heart, it's that receptivity that we're talking about. That in this place of not doing, you are completely open to the beloved. You can say the idea of the beloved in one sense, but it's not an idea. And you'll get that you'll sense that difference. You find that difference just through time. God, Mother makes herself more apparent than that. But that it's this open receptivity that you turn yourself completely into an ear. You are all about simply trying to absorb infinite love, infinite grace, infinite mercy, infinite being. This state in its maturity is what gave Thakur his ecstasy. This absolute overcoming of any sense of individuality, because this is just too small. Anything composed of an idea, anything with even one limit, is just too small. So this is the mature state of that. This is somewhere down the line. Now I'm going to step back here to what I scrolled past and talk about the darkness, talk about the dark night, because I think a lot of us experience this. I think that only because many times in our question and answer periods, we're always complaining. I can't meditate. I don't see that love. I can't think that God is real. I just don't feel it. I'm not there. And so we're struggling all the time. And so St. John of the Cross, he's a specialist on this dark night of the soul. He was locked in a prison by his own monk brothers and punished unjustly for over a year and beaten daily after lunch. That was his dessert for lunch every day, was to get beaten. And he was in a room that was like 4 by 4. I mean, it was a tiny little room that he could only lay down catty corner, and that he had a chamber pot in there that they would never empty. So you can just know the condition of that room. It had one tiny little sliver of a window, he said, and that from his beatings, his cloth, his tunic, healed into the wounds, and every day they would pull that off and beat him again at lunchtime. He went through that for almost a year, and he sat there in that room, and oddly enough, he talks about ecstasy. He talks about getting in touch with the love of God from that experience. Unbelievable. But he says that what the person undergoing the dark night experiences is, and he's going to give us another list here, a painful lack of privation. Now, a privation means that you don't have the basic comforts, right? But he's saying here that a person in the dark night of the soul has all of the comforts. You have all of the worldly things that you need. You have the nice bed and the nice house and the nice relationship. He says, but you have a painful lack of privation. That all of that comfort has dulled you. All of that nicety has blocked your vision. It's made unreliable things seem reliable to you. What other time in life, except for the present condition that we're going through, can you see that things that were once so reliable suddenly aren't, or just watching one thing after another dissolve? And he's saying that's it. When we're in this dark space, it's coming to that knowledge, when we've surrounded ourselves with these comfortable things that have given us a false sense of security, a false sense of stability, a false sense of permanence. He says that we have a darkness in the intellect. We can't quite see what's up and down. We can't really figure out. It seems like we've got it all together, and yet somehow that joy isn't there. That security is not there. That strength's not there. He says there's an aridity in the will regarding the exercise of love. Love seems dry. It doesn't use why. Do I have to? It becomes a chore, it becomes a duty, it becomes an obligation in this state. He says emptiness of all possessions in the memory. That you have this emptiness because you have all of your possessions in your memory, which we know from Sri Nisargadatta. What is your memory? It's your collection of attachments. The things that you've stored in your memory were the temporal impermanent things that you wanted to give your impermanence to. And so you took them and stored them, held on to them in the mind. And he says, now you're in a room and you're suffering from this memory that's full of possessions that can give you nothing but hunger. That's their effect on the present moment. Having put all of your attachments and stored them and held on to them and trying to give them something permanent from yourself by keeping them alive and well in your memory creates only a sense of loneliness and a sense of lack in the present, because they're not always manifested in front of you. They're not always present. They're in the memory. They're gone. They're finished. And so he says that in the dark night of the soul, this is one of the things that's causing that, one of the things that's holding us there. And a general affliction of torment as a consequence. Just that feeling. Ugh. What? Why? How come? Is it worth it? Nothing's worth it. And it just spirals down from there. Depression is from all of these things. He says such persons receive a vivid understanding of their own misery. If you perceive it correctly, it's teaching you a lesson. It's your misery, the misery that your choices and decisions and wrong assumptions have caused, a place that you've put yourself into. That's a hard thing to accept. That's a difficult thing to look in the face and say, I'm responsible for this, you know, because all of us maintain a happy story of why it's not our fault or I've been doing my best. I've been trying my best, because we have that stubborn ego that always has to be at the center, that always has to be right, that always has to be doing its best. That's the thing that we love. We're loving the wrong part of ourselves. We're loving the wrong essence, the wrong jewel, without the philosopher's stone, without God present to turn it into gold. He says they think they will never escape from it. See the dark night of the soul, that part in life where we just kind of give up hope. I'm like, God, I can't get out of this. I can't do it. I can't keep going. I share that experience. I went swimming in the ocean in Texas, South Padre Island, and I was swimming out because I saw some waves breaking way out, and I thought, oh, there must be a shoal out there. And I thought, cool, I'm going to swim out to that shoal. I was an idiot. I was a landlubber. One of my first times at the beach, and I swam and I swam and I swam. And by the time I kind of realized that those waves were illusory, that they were always as far away as they looked like they were from the shore, and I needed to turn back, I realized how far out I had swum, and I was afraid I couldn't get back. And what was even worse is that I learned, like in the ocean, there's waves on top of waves, and so you get in this bowl, and when you're in the bottom of the bowl, you can't see which direction the shore is. And when you're swimming with water all around you, you get no sense of movement. You feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna drown out here. I've been an idiot. I've swam all the way out here in search of something that's not here, and now I can't even see the shore until the conditions are right, where I get pushed back up onto the top of a bowl to be able to see the shore again, to kind of reorient myself. But then again, it goes right back down, and that came to mind to me many years ago, because I realized, wow, what a perfect metaphor for spiritual life that can be. That when we get into this dark night of the soul, when we take our eyes off of the beloved and start getting caught up in circumstance and story and description, when we get stuck in that space, you're at the bottom of that bowl. And he says that you'll feel like you can never escape it. You can't orient yourself. You can't tell up from down. You've got that sense of dread, that sense of misery, and you can't correct it. You start recognizing, oh, maybe I've been an idiot. Maybe I shouldn't have done what I've done. Maybe I should change course. And so you start going, but you can't tell you're moving. You feel like you're still stuck. He says their faculties seem powerless and bound. You can't swim fast enough, and you're not going anywhere when you do. So it's that there's a real dangerous feeling. And if we succumb to that feeling, we shut down. If we succumb to that feeling, that tamas really catches us and starts becoming its own justification and starts adding to its own spiral downward. And so it's important in that time when you're swimming to keep making the effort, keep knowing you're going to make it out. There is a way out of this. There is safety on the shore. There is, in fact, a shore. You're not lost at sea forever. All outside help appears useless. They feel no hope for any breakthrough or remedy in the future. When you start feeling like this, know that this is the period of time before a dawn, before a great awakening or a great seeing. You're being prepared. And he says the effect of all of this is the dread-filled experience of being abandoned by God, This feeling of being abandoned by God becomes the worst part of the suffering, since we are dealing with the one who longs for God with utmost love. That's in the ideal. But even if it isn't the longing for God that wakes you up, it's that sense of being lost at sea when you come to that realization that you're lost. And in the material world, if you don't have any inner sense of this eternal being, this philosopher's stone, if you don't have access to that, it remains that way. There is no comfort in the material world. There is no savior. There is no rescue. The best that you can do is deceive, deceive yourself, lie to yourself, continue the story. You know, distraction. That's the only offering that the world has for us is distraction. Uh, and so, if you find yourself in this situation, you find yourself taking comfort in distraction, know that you're not alone in this space and that you're not in uncharted territory. It's uncharted territory to you, but the scriptures map it out. The experiences of the sages map it out. They know where you are. They know the feeling and the suffering and the pain and the hurt and the hopelessness and the lostness that's involved in that. They know. They don't always write about the cream at the top of the bowl. They write about the pain of the soul separated from the beloved who's lost its way. And they've had that experience at some point in and of themselves, For the great ones like Thakur, he had that Maya appear to him and tempt him with all of these things. Buddha had Mara appear to him and offer him all of those things. Jesus had Satan in the desert appear to him and offer him all of these things. Those are that dark night, those crying out of the soul, and the world offering all of its distraction to you for your comfort. The world offering you all of the things to take your eyes off of the beloved, which is your only hope for being saved out of that darkness, for finding a solution to life. And this is the part now where we're going to focus on why this happens and how we can use it to be a catapult, a very powerful catapult out of that circumstance. He says all these painful experiences, they all have a beneficial fruit to them. And through this, and we find our transformation in this contemplation, in sitting in that space there, making no noise, just simply sitting in the sense of being. you know he says the novelty of knowledge does not lie in the information that we get. It's not the solution to this isn't going to be, oh, just do this and it's fixed, or just do that and it's done. No, because that doing, that sense of independence, I can fix this, is part of the problem. He says the novelty of the knowledge then does not lie in the information, but in a new sense of the presence of God through faith and love. The one who receives it is in a kind of passive activity. There are no adequate human controls before God. Before God, there is only poverty, only confidence, and only abandonment remain. It is worth saying that if this dark night darkens, it does so only to give light. If it humiliates, it does so only to exalt. If it impoverishes, it does so only to enrich. And this is part of that knowing, that unchanging song of bliss that does lie at the heart of each one of us, that has no reason, that you just have to, through faith, assume the existence of. And by doing that, you experience it. Because all of these hardships have a reason. They are to break down that ego that is blocking the light that you can't see. Blocking divine love, blocking that relationship with the beloved that lies in the interior of self. But it's a painful process to tear down that ego because it's who you think you are. It's what you value about yourself, wrongly so, but nonetheless, we value it. And Mother has to humiliate it. Who wants to be humiliated? I've had my share of humiliation in this life, and I know there's no joy in it at the time. But when you learn not to count on that ego, when you learn not to count on that reputation, when you learn not to count on that respect of others, and you find a deeper place to establish the same, that's the beautiful fruit of humiliation, the beautiful thing that grows out of that experience, you know, that this darkness, that it's only there, he says, so that it can get. Without darkness, what is light? You know, What is light without darkness? You can't see it. And that if it impoverishes, it only does so to enrich. If it takes everything away from you, it's only to show you that you never had those things to begin with. Because if something comes to you, it can be taken away from you. And so what happens is an internal shift. You stop thinking, I'm the hero who can strap, whatever weapons on my back and march into trouble, like in all the movies, where somehow they can have 40 machine guns shooting at them and not get hit. That's the movies. That's the lie of Maya. There is no powerful ego that's going to win this battle single-handedly in this life. There is no devotee that's going to win God by his own valor and his own attempt. And Mother has to teach us that it's the absence of this ego that makes us great, that it's the absence of this self-reliance as such that makes us powerful. It's this understanding that it's not the ego that acts, but it's the presence of God within us that manifests. And that's a significant difference. When we come to that understanding, the stress and the anxiety are gone. There's no need for them. Your success and failure was not in your hands. It was not your responsibility as that sense, because it's laying down that very doership, putting it aside. He says they will often find themselves in this loving or peaceful awareness without having first engaged in any active work regarding particular acts. With their faculties, they will not be working actively, but only receiving. Now, this is a very high state. If you are in that ego state, and of course, it doesn't really matter, because if you are in that ego state and you try to do nothing, you're going to suffer more. So that's how you will know that you're not doing it properly, that it's not happening properly, that you haven't laid the self down, you haven't laid the ego down. And it's a distinct difference that if you have laid the ego down, that which rushes in to replace it is this loving and peaceful awareness of the divine that happens through faith and through awareness. You know, and so you hold on to you don't hold on to anything. Take that back. You don't hold on. You don't need to hold on. This is what the proverbial arms of Mother, the proverbial arms of your lover, holding you, and you simply opening to that. Nothing else necessary. Through this contemplation, God teaches the soul secretly and instructs it in the perfection of love without its doing anything or even understanding how this happens. We're talking about a knowledge and an assurance and a love that's transcendental. It's not something that you're going to be left with words to describe. Thakur himself told us that again and again in the wonderful way he said it. Mother is standing on my tongue. There is no way to express this non-experience, this wonderful presence of the beloved. And we're talking in manner of degrees here. In one sense, this is the highest. This is something that we can almost say is reserved for these great souls. But in the other sense, that's also not true, because in a manner of degree, it is ours also, and it can be built on. It can be relied on. It can be found to a point that will manifest in us in a much lesser power. We're not going to become a Thakur or a Jesus or a Buddha, right? But we can become a Brigu who feels forever grateful to Thakur, who takes all of her dignity from the fact that Thakur spoke with her, that he reached out to her. We can be that, we can be the woman that Jesus saved from being stoned for adultery, who will always be grateful and always be full of love for the divine who established her and gave her back a life. We can be the leper at the gate that Jesus healed, who's forever grateful for our healing. You know, we can be the depressed dude that finds a sense of joy, that finds a sense of being in association with that inner knowing of that divinity. We can be that, you know. So it's not that we have to have and think and work for and strive for some highest ideal. This is a manner of being in a very pure space where we've set down any attempt of the ego to do anything for itself and just said, I'm with you, Ma. I'm with you, God. I'm with you, my beloved. and to open all of our reception to simply the experience of that truth, being not afraid to assume that it is truth, to not be afraid to say, this is a fact that I have no basis for. I only know it somehow. I intuit it somehow. This is faith, and this is the basis of everything, Thakur says, because you don't know, and you will not know, and cannot know. You cannot cognate, and you cannot understand these things. You will never win an argument with somebody who believes differently or thinks differently, because it can't happen at that level. Egos argue, souls don't. And so that's not what we're dealing with here. I want to close here with a beautiful prayer from a book called The Prayers of the Carmelites. And this is someone who has found that wonderful space inside, who is sitting in communion with the beloved, with the divine. And there's some wonderful secrets hidden in here. My beloved is the mountains and lonely wooded valleys, strange islands and resounding rivers, a whistling of love-stirred breezes. The tranquil night at the time of the rising dawn, silent music, sounding solitude, the supper that refreshes and deepens love. Catch us the foxes, for our vineyard is now in flower, while we fashion a cone of roses intricate as the pines, and let no one appear on the hill. Be still, deadened north wind. South wind, come, you that waken love. Breathe through my garden. Let its fragrance flow, and the beloved will feed among the flowers. This wonderful identity of God that she is describing here. See, in the Christian world, I think also to some extent within our own Vedanta and in certainly that with Krishna, that the soul is female. The soul is always the bride, and God is always the bridegroom. And so my beloved is the mountains, that one established fact of being, the unmovable, the powerful, the mountain. And the lonely wooded valleys, that wonderful sort of melancholy promise, as it were, that loneliness of wandering through the woods, enjoying, not an elation, but certainly just kind of a delightful mixture of all of it. Strange islands, new things you don't know, things you don't understand, and resounding rivers, that power rushing, the whistling, love-stirred breezes. This is that relationship with the divine. This is a beautiful manifestation of that highest love within. The tranquil night at the time of the rising dawn, that the perfect time of meditation, Thakur says, just between dawn and dusk, or when that change is happening, the presence of God is easily felt there. There's a certain stillness, a certain wonderfulness to the planet at that time, to that place on the planet at the time. That tranquil night at the time of the rising dawn, silent music, music with no cause, the effect of music without the karma of music, as it were, without the doing. That's that repose that she's speaking of there. The ego is given up. It's not doing. It's simply receiving. It's simply open to the presence of God. And just in that openness, there's no room for doing. There's no room for output at that point. It's simply God, God and more God. The silent music, sounding solitude, that sounding silence, that sounding aloneness, but an aloneness in a contentment, aloneness in a freedom, in aloneness made of pure potential, of everything and anything. The supper that refreshes and deepens love, that hunger at the end of the day, the end of the suffering, the end of the efforts, the end of the trail, to sit down, that deepening of love, that wonderful finally being fed, finally eating something that is taking care of the problem and not just distracting us from it. Brother Lawrence makes his own commentary here. He says, the garden in this poem, the garden is the soul. And as the soul calls herself a vineyard in flower, it means the flower of her inner virtues supplies sweet tasting wine, Here she calls herself a garden because the flowers of perfection and virtue that were planted within her have come to life and grow. So, that inner shrine, has become a vineyard in this poem. And by virtuous living and by doing your practices and slogging through the efforts of plowing that field and fertilizing the garden and mowing that yard, putting all that effort out of love into this garden, it's now blooming. It's now at full flower, and the fragrance is there. And she knows the beloved is coming, that it's time, it's right. The vineyard is bursting. And you see that in this next verse here. She says, "Catch us the foxes." That which has been so elusive, that which has been so able to stay just out of my grasp. I'm going to catch it because the vineyard is now in flower. The divine divinity in me is beginning to show. While we fashion a cone of roses intricate as the pines, I'm taking all of this, all that has grown in this garden, and offering it, weaving it together in a beautiful decoration for my beloved in anticipation of that arrival. Let no one else appear on the hill. I need nothing else. This is for nothing else. This is not for anything, anyone but the beloved. Be still, deadening north wind, that wind of the winter, that cold downdraft of the suffering that this garden is now bursting out from. South wind, come, you that waken love, anything that stirs that love. Breathe through my garden. Now he says here, this is very important. He says, the bride does not say, breathe into my garden, but breathe through my garden, for there is a considerable difference between God's breathing into the soul and his breathing through the soul. To breathe into the soul is to infuse graces and gifts and virtues. To breathe through the soul is to touch and put in motion the virtues and the perfections that have already been given, renewing and moving them in such a way that of themselves they afford the soul a wonderful fragrance and sweetness, as when you shake aromatic spices, and they spread their abundant fragrance that before was neither so strong nor so highly perceptible. The soul is not always actually experiencing and enjoying the acquired or infused virtues because they remain within her in this lifelike flower enclosed in the bud, or like aromatic spices whose scent is not perceived until they're shaken and uncovered. This allusion to breathing into the garden, it's really can be in our expression of life. In the beginning of the Christian scriptures, the way that we get this life, that this body comes to life, is God breathes himself into it. That's breathing into the garden. Us as seekers who purified ourselves and get rid of this ego, we become the breath of God through this body. Thakur says that I am a hole through which God can be seen. He is the breath of God breathing through him. And so this is the highest ideal, that we take this life to prepare ourselves through virtue, through practice, through learning, and finally through offering all of it, laying everything down, knowing that nothing of ourselves is worthy or worthwhile. Nothing of our ego self has ever satisfied or ever taken us forward. And it's that giving up, knowing there is nothing there for us, and then coming to the beautiful realization that it didn't matter, that we had everything always within us, this silent song, this silent music, this sounding solitude, that as soon as we took our attention off of our accomplishments, off of our greatness, off of our beauty, off of our enjoyment, off of our pleasures, off of our hungers, off of our thirsts, off of our needs, as soon as we paid attention to that unchanging song of the beloved in the soul, as soon as we took for real that which we couldn't touch, which we couldn't hold or grasp, and through that faith took a chance and let go of even the idea of ourself, we find this beautiful vineyard where God will in fact come, has always been, and that union that everyone longed for becomes reality. And this time doesn't have to be far away. It's right now. That song will never be louder in you than it is right now. It's only the noise of the rest of you that's blocking it out. And through all of the suffering and the dark night of the soul, Know that all of it has one purpose, and that is love. God is trying to get you to let go of the thing that's burning your hand. He's trying to take the knife out of a 2-year-old's hand to give it its ball or whatever it is. And we, like that little toddler, are screaming and not wanting the change. Let go. Let go. Assume the divine in yourself today. And when you sit for meditate, set that affectionate uh, feeling for the company of God, for the company of your highest ideal. Set yourself in an optimism. Know its existence even without proof. Know of its presence even though you can't grab it or touch it or smell it or see it. And then through some mystical presentation, you will know it, not with the mind and ego and a body, but within yourself. Turn within, O mind. There you will find what you are looking for.